These are scary times for immigrants, and that includes permanent residents. Pretty much anyone who's not a US citizen has a little bit of concern on their minds right now, and for good reason. What I want to talk about today is what happens when your I-751 petition to remove the conditions on your green card, typically through a marriage-based conditional resident green card. What happens when that gets denied, and what you can do about it, and a couple different scenarios that might play out. Once your I-751 gets denied, USCIS takes the position that your residency has been terminated. But actually, that's not entirely true. Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, there are only two ways you can actually lose your residency. One is if you sign Form I-407 to voluntarily abandon your green card. And two is if an immigration judge orders you removed from the United States. So what will happen, and this is happening a lot right now, if your I-751 gets denied, is next you'll receive a notice to appear in immigration court. And the notice to appear will say something like, you are not a citizen of the United States, you are a citizen of X country, and on this date USCIS terminated your conditional residency after we denied your I-751, and therefore you are deportable and you have to show up to immigration court. Over the last few years, when an I-751 got denied, the case wouldn't get referred to immigration court for a while, like 6 months or longer. And during these 6 months, you have an opportunity to refile the I-751, either in the same category or in a different category, depending on what the situation allows. But recently, as soon as an I-751 gets denied, my experience has been that like within 2 months, you get a notice to appear in immigration court. When you go to immigration court, you have to ask the judge to either review the decision that USCIS made. So if you think they made a mistake by denying the I-751, you could have the judge make a new decision on it. Or you could file a new I-751 in a different category and have the judge adjudicate that, make a final decision on that. So the question becomes, what do you do as soon as your I-751 gets denied? Two things. One, immediately refile a new I-751. Before that, speak to an attorney if you don't have an attorney and figure out what the best strategy is. But figure out a way to immediately refile an I-751, assuming you can do so in good faith. And two, don't travel. I actually just consulted with a guy, and this was my first time with this exact experience, where he left the US after his I-751 got denied, and he was placed, and a notice to appear was issued. He was placed in removal proceedings while he was outside of the United States. And my first thought is, oh crap, that's a huge problem because you might not be allowed back in. And that is a real risk. But I spoke to a couple attorneys who've, over the last 30 years have had similar experiences. And most of them basically said, make sure he has a new I-751 filed with a new extension letter ready to go when he re-enters the US. And they might hold him, they might even detain him at the airport, but they should allow him back in to attend his removal proceedings because after all, he is still a permanent resident. But let me just tell you, you do not want to be outside of the US while removal proceedings are initiated. The general wisdom is that once you're in removal proceedings, if you leave the US while the case is pending, that's viewed as deporting yourself, just abandoning the removal proceedings and leaving. But in this case, he was outside of the US already when the NTA was issued. So I haven't personally had this experience before. I just consulted with this person and then I did some legal research. But you don't want to be in that situation. In fact, I tell people that if your I-751 is at serious risk of getting denied, try not to even leave the US, because in the small chance that it gets denied and an NTA is issued while you're outside of the US, that's a really dangerous situation to be in. If you're at risk of having your I-751 denied, something that you could do every day you're outside of the US is check the case status of your I-751 and make sure it hasn't been denied. If it is denied, I would immediately file a new I-751 and immediately re-enter the US before removal proceedings initiate. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you need any personal assistance with any family-based immigration matter, removing the conditions, whether it's based on a good faith marriage or divorce, divorce, or if your removal would result in extreme hardship, give us a call. We also handle naturalization and some removal defense cases. The information for my office is in the video description below. If you're just interested in learning more about immigration topics and you want to hear an attorney's perspective, be sure to subscribe. I do handle these cases nationwide, so it's applicable if you're anywhere in the United States. And I'll see you guys next time for another video.